Today on the Chat and Chew Show.
So sometimes people think church is God, and they are two separate things.
Yeah.
God is God, and church is a building full of people who need God.
Right.
And so,
Hey everybody, it's your girl Roxanne, and today we're making an avocado toast.
well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Chat and Chew Show. I'm with Medea. Hello. I went straight Medea. I don't even know why. Well, my name is Betty.
I'm Roxanne.
And the intention of the Chat and Chew Show is to empower you to do relationships better.
Yes.
And if you're honest, you will say that sometimes navigating relationships can be really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Chat and Chew Show was designed to, again, give you tips and tools and things like that you can do all relationships better.
Yes.
Because everybody is in a relationship.
Everyone.
So you are, last time you said a mailman.
Yes. You could also, you could work for DoorDash.
You can work for, especially nowadays.
No sponsorship.
No. You could be a grocer.
Yeah.
You could be a toilet paper manufacturer.
You could be a Target team member.
You could work for Amazon in the warehouse.
Can I just say, Betty?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we're dealing with this virus that's going around,
Yeah.
right? But I was on the Beltway and I saw an Amazon Prime truck, like, broken down.
Oh.
I felt so bad for the driver.
Oh.
Because I'm like, those Amazon Prime people
I
are
know.
gonna be mad at him.
They're going to be so mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to need to know how to do his relationships better.
He had a hard day.
Because he had a hard day. So again, that's the purpose of the show. And if you watch episode 24, you're going to be full aware of what we're going to talk about at this, Roxanne is sign language. I don't know. She went Janet Jackson on us. 5, 4, 3.
I need a glove.
I know. Really. But so in episode 24, we talked about a topic that has affected so many Americans and probably people around the world too. And we call that church hurt.
Yes.
And people have been really hurt oftentimes by the church. So today we want to talk to you about how you can navigate through that. And we have Thank you guys so much for hanging with us here at the Chat and Chew Show.
Yay.
And we're going to be talking about a topic that, oftentimes, like we said earlier, really affects a lot of people, so much so that they turn their backs on God. And our desire for you is that you figure out how to manage this whole thing. I'm calling church hurt, but it's known by different names, spiritual abuse and things like that. So, Roxy, Elwood and I, my husband, you're like, I know your husband. We were a part of this church from the ground up. Like, I don't know if you guys know what a church plant is, but this was a brand new church. They didn't have a building. They were renting a space and all of this. And we started like pretty much day one. And we were responsible at the time for doing the music, creating the bulletins, doing the PowerPoint, loading in the sound equipment, doing any creative, unloading the sound. We were the first to get there,
Wow.
and then the last ones to leave, right? We were responsible for housing all the equipment and everything. And if there was ever a change in what was going to take place in the service, we were notified and we had to flip it all around and make this big change. So we were there from the beginning of everything, and we put our heart and our soul and everything into it. And because I'm on stage, I was singing a part of this church, and people thought I was the pastor's wife because they saw me sing and then they saw him preach,
wow.
right? And so the pastor's wife wasn't involved really at the church. Nothing's wrong with that. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to. But I think what happened over time, she started to feel like, I'm talking a few years later, she started to feel like, well, wait a minute, I'm the pastor's wife. So I was at a meeting, hanging out, ladies hanging out, and everybody's laughing about when they were kids. I'm laughing, everybody's laughing. She happened to be there. We're all just laughing about, remember we had acne, kind of thing. And afterwards, I thought nothing of it. Afterwards, she called me and said, I didn't appreciate you laughing at me. I was like,
At her specifically?
At her specifically.
Wait.
I said, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, when I was telling my story, you were laughing at me. And I'm like, we were all laughing. And it was little things like that kept on happening while we were there. And you're talking about being hurt by that, because here I am serving the ministry here with you guys, and I felt like you were coming for me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that was tough. Like, I felt some kind of way every time I was on stage whenever I saw her, because I was like, I tried to befriend her, but it was just a mess. Needless to say, we ended up leaving that church a few years later, but that was really tough.
And in her position, did you even feel like you could address that head on at all?
Not really, because I felt like I had, because my husband worked there,
right?
But I had to be diplomatic about how I approached it, because I didn't want it to be like. But then, too, it's this thing, like, I had to stop and think, well, was I laughing at her? No,
Maybe I wasn't. I
didn't know, right? Because you got this thing in your head, like, you're supposed to represent God, and now you're, I feel like, coming for me on something I didn't even do. Yeah. So, I mean, that was really painful, really painful. I don't know. It's difficult a lot of times to navigate through church. Before we started rolling the tape, our producer was telling us about an experience she had. It made me think kind of similar. Right. When she was, go ahead and tell us.
Oh, yeah. So, our producer, Vanessa, y'all know about, so she was actually attending the church for the first time. And when she went to the church, she was just looking for a seat. A lot of people were there. It sits between two men, just an available seat. Yeah. She's singing to herself. And then after the service, someone she doesn't even know comes up to her, a woman, and says, "Oh, you're brave sitting between two husbands like that."
Oh, wow. See, that's what I'm saying.
And it's like, this is her first time at the church.
Right.
How do you even approach someone?
Right.
Their first time at the church. And so she said, of course, that because she's obviously used to church and everything. Yeah. She knows how things can be. She just kept it moving and you could come back the next Sunday or whatever. Yeah. But if you imagine if you're not a Christian already, this is your first time, if you're just learning about church, I would be turned off and go home and never come back. I know,
and never come back, because then in your mind you're thinking, oh, all churches must be like this. Right?
Or like, are you judging me? Because, you don't know where I am.
Right.
And so I could feel insecure, feel like you're judging me personally. Like, do I look like I'm going to do something?
I don't know. Vanessa, they have on a mini skirt or something.
And then, like, were the wives somewhere looking at me and I didn't know? Yeah. I was feeling all kinds of paranoid. Yeah. For someone who doesn't know me at all. Yeah. To come say something like that.
And what we described are minor things to some of the big things that have happened to people. And so sometimes people think church is God, and they are two separate things. Yeah. God is God, and church is a building full of people who need God. Right. And so a lot of times they function in a way, they bring all their baggage, we bring all of our baggage to it. And then again, the reason for this show is to help us to navigate through relationships, and being able to navigate through those sometimes hurtful church relationships can be difficult. So when we come back, we're going to have a special guest with us who's going to help us navigate through some church hurt. Now, a delicious word. Let's chew.
Hey everybody, it's your girl Roxanne, and today we're making an avocado toast. So I'm excited about this because I'm going to top it with a poached egg. This is my first time making a poached egg at home, even though I order it out a lot. So we're going to get started by putting on a small pot of water to boil, and that's going to be for our eggs later. So you can put that on the boil, and now we're going to focus on our toast and our avocado spread. So with our avocado spread, all we're doing is taking one avocado and mushing up the flesh. And so avocados are soft once they're ripe, and so once you have that peeled and the seed out, all you're going to do is mush it up, and I'm adding a little bit of onion powder to mine. And so once that's all mixed up, you can set that aside, and then we're going to brown our toast. And so with the toast, you can use any kind of bread that you like. I'm using an Ezekiel bread for mine. It just gives it kind of a seed and nut taste to the avocado toast. And so once that's browned, we're just going to set that in the plate. I'm not using butter. I'm just going to go straight to the avocado spread. I spread my avocado on top. I sprinkle a little bit of red pepper for added spice. And then I'm going to add some fresh arugula because it has a very specific flavor, and it'll just add like a different level of flavor and texture to the dish. And once I've done that, I can set that aside. And now I'm focusing on my poached eggs. So now the water should be brought to a boil by now. And what I'm going to do for my poached eggs is I'm going to drop in that boiling water. And so what it'll do, you'll notice that the egg white will turn white fairly quickly in the water. And once that does, you now can add your second egg. And so that's just so that the two, egg whites and everything don't marry each other while in the boiling water. You just want to wait for one to start cooking first. And so once you have your eggs in there, they should take about 3 minutes to cook. And you can, and I'm draining the pot once they're cooked, because you don't want to cook them all the way. That yolk is still going to be kind of runny. And so once they're cooked on the outside, about 3 minutes, you can pour out the water and then scoop gently, very gently, scoop up those poached eggs and then lay them on top of your avocado toast. So I'm doing 1 egg per piece of toast. And once that's done, just sprinkle some salt, pepper on top, and your dish is good to go. And I really like this when I, cut into this. You get all the flavor of the egg, the arugula, the pepper, and avocado, all that mixed together. And it's a really good taste, and it's also a filling dish, so really good for breakfast. So give it a try. Let me know what you think, and until next time.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody, and thank you again for joining us here at the Chat and Chew Show. As promised, we got a special guest.
I'm back, man. I'm back.
And this is Pastor. This is Elwood Jones, my husband of 31 years.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
Hey, the time gone.
She will help us.
So precious.
It's so precious. So we got to do another marriage episode. But he is here today to help us navigate through some church hurt. And a lot of people have gone through church hurt before. So I know you have.
I have. But I want to go back to the relationship episode.
Oh no!
I have the most views on Chat and Chew. All right, that's not important right now. We're dealing with church hurt.
Church hurt. Yeah. And we have to break out the big guns because, as a person in the congregation, you get hurt in the church and stuff. You don't get an opportunity to talk to a pastor. Because like I said on episode, 24 that we did, a lot of times pastors are in a fraternity and they kind of stick together.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we had to pull one out to say, why y'all do that? No.
Why
y'all? All
the churches, you are the representative.
Yeah.
All the churches. But do you mind telling us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so my story goes way back. But I remember when I had first got introduced to Christ, I was actually at a church, and this is going to be kind of crazy. I was at a church, and I had a dream that the pastor was smoking dope, and it was some other crazy stuff that was going on. So I was very young, had this dream that happened, right? So I go to this prayer meeting, and we're all in a prayer meeting, everybody's excited. And I said, man, I had this crazy dream about pastor. He said, what? I said, I had this dream that he was stealing money and that he was smoking dope, right? And I said, man, the devil is a liar. And I'll never forget the organist's eyes got real big.
Oh, wow.
I remember that, right? And I later found out that the pastor was really smoking dope, abusing people in the church. And so I had this kind of interesting discernment early on as it relates to pastors and the trickiness of pastors.
Can be. Yeah. So you were a young person then going to church. Young. So that's why you were able to say, guess what, everybody?
Yeah,
I had a dream.
I was naive.
You was naive. Yeah. Wow. So because I'm married to you,
right?
I know the hurt you've gone through. I've gone through it too. Yeah. So why in God's name would you want to start a church?
Right, it's a great question. First of all, I did not want to start a church. I fought it for a long time because I have a lot of friends who are pastors, and they started out doing youth ministry and just, regular brothers who felt a sense of call. And so the reason that number one, God called me to do this. But the other thing is, because of the hurt and pain that I experienced with so many churches and just seeing the manipulation and the abuse and just really the annihilation of the family in some cases, that I said that if I ever pastor, I would never see that happen in our church. And so it's interesting because the pastor really, the heart of a pastor is to shepherd, to protect. And what happens is you find a lot of churches that really the pastors are narcissistic and it's really about them. And they kind of live in this kind of kingship castle idea versus what I believe God's called us to serve, you know, and to love and to protect. And so yeah, I made a conscious decision that because of the abuse that I had experienced, I would never become the abuser.
And I think it's good that you go in with that type of personality or that thought in your mind, because being with him, church planting is hard, and church is hard, and people bring this
And I would
up.
imagine there was some healing that you had to do yourself in order to make that promise even.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the healing, there's a lot of things that go into the healing process. And if I could speak to the healing, one of the things that I just believe in holding short accounts. Like, no matter what happens to me, God has given us a mandate to forgive and to love. And love is best examined when you have to love somebody that's not lovable. You know, so that's one.
So look, you're not saying that I should love my abuser. I mean, what do you say? You said
no. I'm saying there's an aspect of love that you should even have towards your abuser, but you can love them from afar. You cannot see one of the things, and one of the principles that I will say: if you're in an abusive relationship, whether it's a married relationship and it's real abuse, like you're being abused, then you leave. You don't stop loving. It's impossible to stop loving somebody you've been loving for years, and even in church or family. But if you're being abused, leave. Practical leave. And what happens is a lot of people, they make church and they make God synonymous. So they think that if they leave church, they're actually leaving God. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, I would say again, just one of the areas that I just felt like if I'm going to be free and I'm going to operate on an even field, that I have to, number one, learn to love in the midst of the situation. And love is and forgiveness is a process. It's not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Sometimes I call it a revolving door of forgiveness. You just keep forgiving. You just keep forgiving. You circle them through, and so we say. I mean, there's still things now. There's some hurt that I've experienced from pastors that I feel like I forgave them. But when I see them do it to other people, that hurt still comes back up again. It doesn't mean I didn't forgive them. The pain is still there. Can I just say this? And this maybe this is relevant, but people say that if you forgive, you should forget. I think that's crazy. If you've been abused, do not forget that. Please don't forget that. You can still forgive, but please remember that. And as you're forgiven, as you're finding love, as you're finding healing, as you're finding God's grace, but don't forget.
So the first thing you said for a person who is going through church hurt, leave. Like if you are entangled in a church that's abusing you, then leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think the succession or how you leave is important too. I mean, you give every opportunity to meet with the pastor. I remember I had a situation with a pastor who it just ended up not working well, and I found out later on that the pastor actually lied on me. To the elders and the deacons and the financial team and all these people out. And the only reason I even knew that he lied because when I was sitting in the room with everybody, there was this interrogation that was going on.
Wow.
And I had one guy was like, so tell me, didn't you? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I remember doing this. I said, you can ask the pastor. He's right here. And the pastor just put his hand there because he had already lied and told them something that wasn't true. But I didn't even know that he had lied. Wow. And so I made an attempt to reconcile with the pastor, even though I felt like I wasn't in the wrong. But I was like, hey, I believe in the ministry gift of reconciliation, that we reconcile vertically and horizontally. I think it works both ways. So I went after that, but he wouldn't meet with me. He wouldn't. Can I just say this one thing about growing through the pain? One of the things that was hard for me was I would say I'm going to forgive you, but God kept coming back to me and asking me, "What did you learn in it?" Now this is crazy what I'm about to say. And so I didn't realize that I was bitter. I forgave, but there was still bitterness, and the bitterness was in the shadow of my heart. And so, anyway, God would say, "What did you learn?" Nothing. They hurt me. They beat me down. They did this. They did. They still talk about me. When I see them, they don't even look at me. You know what I mean? Like, so I went years, and I remember God kind of speaking to my heart and say, to the degree you're able to forgive and learn the lessons, I can elevate you to the next level that I have for you. That was critical for me. And I'll tell you, it was probably about a good 3 years, at least 3 years, and maybe even more, till I finally said, okay, God, I learned that. One little small thing, almost petty like, and then, but it allowed the other things like, oh, here's where I played a part in it too. I could have been a lot more mature. I handled this. It was like certain things like that. And I think it got me to a place now of not just healing, but to be able to serve and even shepherd well, in the area of relationships.
So you would say then to a person who is hurt, going through some church hurt, leave. And then
lead the right way, as much as possible. The Bible says, live at peace as much as it is possible. Yeah.
And then you would say to the person, try to look at lessons learned. I think that's a value for anything you go through in life. Because to me, if you don't learn the lessons, then you will repeat it. You keep doing the same thing. You keep attracting the same kind of people. You keep putting yourself in vulnerable situations. I think the thing that's difficult about church, though, we said this at episode 24, is that in that church, you approach it like, I'm doing this for God. So it has this extra weight on it. On it too. So just thinking about lessons that I learned, and then if I had so.
Well, another thing, like don't play. I'm going to say this: don't play it too close, because what happens is, and nobody in this room, but what happens is we play God and church so close that, again, I'm kind of being repetitive here. I feel like we follow too close. We follow the pastor too close. I love what and the church can do no wrong until it does wrong, and then you broke off, you gone, right? But because you made it too close, and so what happens is to me it's a heart issue. And it's a worship issue, because now I'm asking the question, are you worshiping the church? Are you worshiping the pastor? Or are you worshiping God? And so who was it? Paul, who said, follow me as I follow Christ. And I would say that me or any pastor, once he gets off the path, you run off the path. You don't go with him. Like if he starts cheating on his wife and that see, now this is going to be tricky right here. So maybe I shouldn't say it. I'm going to get a lot of pastors in trouble right here. Well, I'm just saying for me, integrity matters. Character matters. Not perfection. I'm not even getting into you got to be sanctified and holy and you got to do all of that. I'm not saying that. But there's certain things that as a leader, you just should follow suit in it. One is I can't tell another woman if her husband says, hey, I think you spend too much time at church, but don't listen to your husband. That's crazy, but that kind of stuff happens in church. So, and I'll just say this from a priority standpoint, this I think is important. God is number one, and church is not number two. All right? God is number one, and if you're married, your spouse is number two. And after that, your job.
Go to work.
Not even your church did. Like, I'm a pastor saying that. And most pastors, like, they'd be waiting outside the door to shoot me for saying stuff like that. But a lot of churches feel different about it. They're like, no, your church is, up here. And it just isn't. It just isn't. Yeah. And I would say the other thing is, if you have been hurt by church, I just want to kind of encourage people to You can leave the church, but don't leave God.
Yeah.
And the reason you don't leave God is because God would never leave you. So now that's easier said than done, because there are people that are so damaged by church that they've actually left the faith. Period.
Yeah.
And so it's like that 1 Timothy 4 scripture that says that there are people who have left the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And then it talks about this whole idea of how they've listened to false doctrine. Doctrine that tells you that church is the priority, or that you obey the man of God, even if he's wrong. Even if he's telling you wrong, you still obey him. And so some people who fell into that, and then they saw, oh, yeah, this thing took me the wrong way, I'm leaving the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm just saying is, I'm hoping that those people, I would say they're not far from God. You may feel like you are, but God is there for you and just waiting for you to stick your hand out and bring you back home. Not home to church, but home to God.
Wow. What would you say though to those people who are like, okay, forgive, heal and all that, but when did they get their payback?
So, vengeance is the Lord's. Vengeance is mine. Vengeance is, and here's the thing. I'm going to tell you this. I promise everyone who's saying, man, why? They haven't got theirs. I got hurt, but look at them. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. I promise you. Every dog has his day. I hate saying it like that. But hey, God will not be mocked. What you sow, you will reap. Trust me on that one. So I would even say there are people who have hurt me that I've actually prayed for them that God's mercy would be upon them. Because I knew what would happen to them. And I can get, if I ever write a book, I probably wouldn't use names, but I can give you case in point on every one of them. From stroke to losing their marriage to having, extramarital affairs. I can go on through it, all kinds of pain.
Yeah, so I guess the
Nobody
point
escapes.
is,
Nobody escapes sin.
you don't have to try to take care of them yourself.
I'm sorry, did I do too much?
You was feeling that thing.
I'm sorry.
Cool. So I think if you are going through some church hurt, we keep going. Even in the episode 24, we kept saying leave if you're in it. I know a lot of times it's not that easy, but I do think what you said is of value. What lesson did you learn while you were there? I think that's huge, because if you don't, you can leave and jump back into the same thing again. But what lesson did you learn? And then, like Elwood said, that God is for you. He is not against you. And He is not the building church, but church is Big C Church, that we are everywhere. And my hope for you is that you find a healthy place that you can grow and be in community. So thank you guys for hanging with us.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.
Well, thank you. Hey, let's get those views up on YouTube. I want thumbs up, I want likes.
And we'll see you next time.
All right, God bless. Thank you.
This show was brought to you by the Chat and Chew Company. Music by Elwood Jones. Lyrics by Roxanne. Bring a Chat and Chew live event to your organization. Contact us at chatandchewshow@gmail.com.